Welcome back to Coach Walk's Corner. We're in a series that asks the question, what are the key things that players should understand before leaving your program? So this is part 3, and I want to remind you of the main theme that I want you to get that I've constantly talked about in part 1 and in part 2, and that is whatever you emphasize and talk about most is what your players will understand when they leave your program. So you really have to evaluate your communication. And I'll give you 3 questions at the end. Once I give you my last few points, I'll give you 3 questions that will help you in your process of thinking about what are you emphasizing and what you want to emphasize. So let me remind you, in part 1, we talked about courage or coward, attitude of gratitude, and I want them to understand commitment over comfort. And then in part 2, I explained that love is a verb, I explained what uncommon work ethic is, and what adversity reveals. So it's part 3. Let's get it. Number 7, the HATER'S Manifesto. I love this one because this is often so misunderstood. Here's how I found this out. So if you remember, several years ago, LeBron James was a player for the Cleveland Cavaliers, and he was a free agent. And he decided to do the decision with ESPN. So this was a production where I think it was about a 30-minute show where they had this big build-up of his career, and then he was going to reveal where he was going to sign in free agency. This was unprecedented. Never seen this done by any professional player, certainly no one of his stature. I mean, we see this all the time with high school athletes, doing their commitments to college, but this was something different with this professional decision. So LeBron James' decision was he was going to take his talents to South Beach. And then the next day he flew down to Miami and got with Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade, the 3 big stars. And they had a kind of a welcome party at Miami's arena. And they're in their uniforms and cheerleaders and music, and it's very hyped and great production. But at one point during that time, they were interviewing LeBron, and they asked about why he was coming here and how many championships that he can win or they could win. And LeBron says something like, I'm not just talking about not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5. And so it rubbed America the wrong way. Certainly if you was a Cleveland Cavaliers fan, you didn't like that he left. Miami didn't mind it. But for the rest of the country, what I saw is a guy who was one of the most beloved athletes in the world. He was Mr. Clean. Did everything right since coming to the NBA at straight out of high school. People loved him. He did the decision, and he did that announcement and the not 1, not 2, not 3 in Miami, and people hated the guy. He went from the most loved to the most hated. And so a principle it came out of that. I called it the HATER'S Manifesto. And the reality is people will feel what's lacking, and they will deflate what is full. And so America, obviously not everybody, but a lot of people looked at that decision, looked at that hoopla about where he was deciding to go, and they felt like LeBron was inflating himself. It's being self-absorbed, wanting attention, and things like that. And so they began to hate that guy like no other. He became enemy number 1 in the NBA because that's the principle. People will feel what's lacking. So if LeBron had came across really, really humble and deflecting all attention to everybody else, it's not about him, and he didn't have this production of where he was going to go, people will fill that up. They will give him his just due. They will give him credit if they feel like people aren't giving him the credit or the recognition that he deserves. But if our players don't understand that if they draw attention to themselves, they're constantly talking about their accomplishments and what they did, they're constantly demanding feedback and attention, it brings on a reaction of hate. People will hate on. We see this all the time on social media. And the reality or the point is Be humble. It's always better to be humble. It's always better to allow other people to recognize you instead of you recognizing yourself and demanding people see it. That's the Haters Manifesto. People will feel what's lacking, just like a balloon is deflated. People will feel it. But if that balloon has too much pressure and too much attention, people will deflate what is full. That's the Haters Manifesto, and our players need to understand that. Be humble. Okay, the next thing that they need to understand, number 8, selfless, not selfish. Okay, babies think the world revolves around them. And if they don't learn that it doesn't, they will destroy their relationship. So here's what this means. All of us, when we were born, when you were born, you came out the womb, and the moment you got hungry, you screamed at the top of your lungs, the top of your freaking lungs, until you got that milk, until you got that food. It did not matter what time it was. It did not matter what was going on with your parents, your providers. Like, that didn't matter. The only thing that mattered is you was hungry, and you're going to scream until somebody give you some food. And so that mindset of the baby is that they're taught that the world revolves around them. When they fill up that diaper, it doesn't matter if we're on an airplane with a bunch of strangers and and you're screaming at the top of the lungs, and it's very inconvenient right now for your screaming around all these other people. That doesn't matter to the baby. What matters is change my freaking diaper. That's what matters. And that's all they care about. And so that's the human experience. We are born with the world revolving around us. But as we grow up, we must understand that it doesn't. And if you act like it does, you will destroy your relationships. See, a parent doesn't mind that from a baby. The baby doesn't understand. The baby needs the parent to do everything for him. But if my teenage boys act like the world revolves around them, if my teenage boys demand attention, demand the things that they want, regardless of what else is going on in the world, that would sour our relationship. That would sour their relationship with their friends, with their teammates. And so this is a learned skill. It's not innate. Okay. There's a strong biblical principle in Philippians this is the core of what I want our players to get. Don't look out only for your own interest, but take an interest in others too. Okay, we're not saying disregard like what matters to you. What we're saying is the world doesn't revolve around you. Take an interest in others also, not just what matters to you, not just how things feel, how you feel about it. What about how your teammate feels about it? What about how your spouse feels about it? See, the person who can do that, who can take an interest in the interests of others, is a person who's going to be prosperous in their relationships, and countless opportunities will be available to them. So selfless, not selfish. Babies think the world revolves around them. If they don't learn it doesn't, they destroy their relationships. Take an interest in others. And my last point, number 7, figure it out. I need players to understand they are responsible to figure it out. And what that means is you accept full responsibility for your life with no excuses. The buck stops with you. You have to figure it out. So we all face adversity. We all have difficult decisions that we have to make. Sometimes it's created by our own making. Sometimes it's created by somebody else. We're all dealt a deck of cards to play out our lives. And sometimes my decision is going to be a lot easier than the next person. Life is not fair. But what I've learned and what I want them to learn is you just figure out how to play your cards the best way that you can. And it's your responsibility to do that. It's not your parents' life. It's not mom or dad's life or grandparents. It's not your coaches. It's not. You may play for me, but it's your athletic career, not mine. Okay, that's a reality I want them to understand. Okay, you might be in my class as I teach you, but it's your grade, not mine. You're the one who's trying to graduate. So the player has to accept full responsibility. And this has been such a key thing as in this COVID world that we're in right now, depending on when you're watching this. Schools are going virtual. They got all these hybrid models, and it is just not good for every student. And so the one thing I had to communicate to our players is, it's tough, it's difficult, it's different. It may not be what's best for you, but you have to figure it out. That is not an excuse to fail. That is not an excuse to not succeed. What if the teacher is not a great communicator? Is that your excuse to fail? See, that teacher is probably still going to keep their job and probably still going to be paid, but you're the one that's going to have to repeat classes. You're the one who's not moving forward in towards graduation. So we have to take responsibility and understand if I can make the right decision and I accept full responsibility, I can always move myself in and out of any situation. Okay, that's what I want them to understand. The reality is your parents may not accept responsibility. Okay, they may not make the right choices, but that is not an excuse for you. Your teachers may not adjust. That is not an excuse for you. Your coach may not call the right plays. That is not an excuse for you. The coach is not on the field, you are. So the buck starts with you. And the point is, figure it out. It's difficult, yes, figure it out. It's online learning, okay, figure it out. It's a new position, okay, figure it out. Whatever the obstacle is, figure it out. That's what I want. So, there's the list of 9. Again, go back and watch part 1, part 2, and obviously this one for in-depth. But those are the 9 things that I want for my program, the players to get. I'm sure that there's obviously a lot of the things that I think about that's important, but you get what you emphasize. So those are the 9 things that I emphasize. So here's how you get started. Here's some things to think about, some takeaways, some other takeaways. What are you talking about most? You got to evaluate that. You got to ask that question. Do your end of the season evaluation, self-evaluation. Ask your players, ask your coaches. What did you learn? What do you feel like is most important to me as a coach in terms of off the field? Learn what they say. Are they saying the things that you've been emphasizing? What are your buzzwords? Okay. How do you communicate concepts, larger concepts quickly? How do you remind players about concepts? So for me, these are all my buzzwords that communicates a larger meaning, but commitment over comfort, they know right away what that means. The HATER'S Manifesto, I don't have to tell that story. They know what that means. So you got to use buzzword. What are they? Are you using them over and over? And are you testing them? Whatever you get what you evaluate. So test them on those buzzwords. What does it mean? Find ways to check knowledge. You get what you evaluate, you get what you emphasize. And so that's one of the tools that I've done in one of the programs. We would say our core beliefs, and I would do fill in the blanks. And I just kept taking away words to see if they were learning it, make them memorize it. So, love feedback, any comments, questions. Those things spur on my ability to articulate, maybe spur on future talks. So feel free to comment. Thank you for journeying with us, and what are the key things that your players should understand before leaving your program.